one of my favorite guests of all times. Arthur Brooks coming on the show. Everybody be cool, don't freak out. This man wrote a book with Oprah. He's friends with the Dalai Lama. He's hanging out with Rainn Wilson. He ran a think tank I'm a part of. He's got multiple best-selling books. He's one of the best speakers I've ever seen. And I basically started this podcast for an excuse to get to bother brilliant minds like his for you and me. I want to get into this in detail because not only is he a Harvard professor and a PhD, but he has something called the Happiness Institute, where he basically tries to figure out how us little crazy monkeys running around with a bunch of anxiety can live lives that we love. Arthur Brooks, I am so excited to have you.
Thank you.
It takes me back actually to the first time I saw you speak, which was at AEI a million years ago at a place that we don't talk about publicly online. Hopefully they won't kick me out.
The secret conclave.
Oh, I snuck in as a little...
It's actually on the North Pole.
Yeah.
It's the Fortress of Solitude.
That's where I think most people think things like that are,
Yeah.
Conservative think tanks. But I remember vividly, to set the scene, it's like kind of a stadium seating. You've
Right.
got the world leaders in there, right? Everybody's in suit and ties. It's some of the biggest names out there. And I remember you gave a speech, which I still think is one of my favorite speeches I've ever seen. I didn't expect it to be on the topic. It was on love. And so, I remember kind of looking around surreally at the people in the audience, and you were speaking about love. And there was one scene where you put on classical music.
Right.
And so the lights kind of dimmed and this classical music goes on. And then the lights kind of come back on again and I look over and I think Ted Cruz is wiping a tear. No, I don't know if he actually was, but there were people in the audience that were moved in a way that I don't think they're used to being moved. And I was wondering, one, what made you talk about love to a group of hardened politicians and world leaders on the conservative side? And two, what made you think that you could make it land with them?
Love is the secret to happiness, and it's what we want. Here's the basic business proposition behind it. Each of us is a startup enterprise. You are Codie Sanchez, Inc., and you're the founding entrepreneur of that enterprise. That's the enterprise that matters the most. You're in charge of that. You get to build that over the course of your life. That's your life's adventure. And that enterprise has a currency, like any enterprise has a currency. We talk about business. You and I, I'm an economist, and you're famous for doing this work where you're helping people to invest in a better way and build their lives financially. The fortune that you talk about in your work, and I have as an economist as well, of course, is financial resources, is money. The currency of your life, of the enterprise of your life, is love and happiness. That's what it is. And if you want to become rich in that, and that's really what matters, you better understand how it works. Furthermore, you can treat it with the same seriousness as I would treat money as an economist. I'm a social scientist. I'm a behavioral social scientist by background. I study love and happiness and the behavior of people to accumulate it and to screw it up. And so I thought to myself, I'm going to go to the best business audience I could possibly ever meet, talk to them about their lives like serious enterprises and the fortune they're trying to create, which is happiness through love. And that's why it works, because I treat it with seriousness. It's not just feelings. Love isn't a feeling. Love is to will the good of the other with the way that you live your life. It's a decision. It's hard. It's hard-edged. It takes an incredible commitment, and that's something that any serious person can respond to.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible to watch how they reacted. And I think even probably surprised a lot of them, and is why you were so successful for, 11 years there, and sort of changing the culture a bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, and pushing on them to say, by the way, you should want people to think that you're empathetic and care about
truly.
Humanity, not just pulling yourself up by your bootstraps.
Of course. I got into the whole for enterprise game. I came from a family that had no background in business or any interest in capitalism whatsoever. My father was a math professor. My mother was an artist. And they were, properly of the left. They were, I grew up in Seattle, Washington, in a family of artists and academics. Imagine the political milieu, especially in my 20s. I was making my living as a musician, and I was interested in ideas. But I had that cultural background, and I remember thinking to myself, there's so much poverty in the world. What actually can we do? And I started to look at real ideas, and what I found is that the free enterprise system, properly understood, is an expression of the generosity that we can bring. When we push it to the margins of society, there's no other force that can lift people out of poverty. And I became a warrior for free enterprise, not because I care about investment banks. God love them. The reason is because I want there to be less poverty in the world. Yep. I want to lift people up from the margins. In other words, I believe that everything that we can do up to and including our free enterprise system should be an expression of love. That's how it all hangs together in my brain, at least.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, you did an incredible, documentary on that too, on capitalism that I really liked.
The Pursuit,
right,
in 2019.
Yeah, that I thought did a beautiful visual job of showing what capitalism can do. Remember that TED Talk from that guy who showed the dot chart of how poverty had changed over time?
Right.
It was like one of the first TED Talks I saw.
Right.
And like your integration of that into the movie was pretty incredible too.
Yeah, and you know John Papola, the filmmaker. He lives in Austin like you do, and he's he makes beautiful films. He just followed me around the world for 3 years, and just shot film. I was in India, and I was in Denmark, and I was just in all these different places that I go to do my work when I was president of AEI, and he knit it together into this narrative about a way to see the world. I mean, the whole idea that if for you to care about success, about lifting yourself up to be the kind of person who is responsible, hardworking, and meritorious, that's not incompatible with trying to save the world. On the contrary, these are ideas that have to be together. If you're not serious about actually marshaling resources with the utmost seriousness in your life and about the education and the prosperity of other people are going to stay poor. That's just the truth.
100%. Well, and I think if anybody is concerned about, is it right to pursue wealth and is it right to pursue socioeconomic growth, that video is a wonderful way to ease into it and to explain to other people. I think this generation, it's really important how mathematically, it's just the numbers.
Yeah.
And the numbers show that while it is a highly flawed system in many ways, there does not appear to be a better one.
Yeah, that film is available on YouTube these days. It was on Netflix originally. It's on YouTube right now.
Okay, I also want to talk about something else. So I was thinking about trolls, haters
you
this
have
morning.
Some of those?
Now that I'm on the internet, I'm like, do you really want to be famous?
6.8 million Instagram followers. It's amazing.
Wow.
Congratulations. I mean, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think similar to your pursuit, it's this idea that I think the world abhors a vacuum, and that's why I think it's really important for people like you to have giant microphones, because if not you, no shame to them, I actually respect them in many ways, then it's a world of Kardashians. And I think that's problematic in some ways because the ethical moral compass doesn't seem to better society. It seems that the nuclear family is really important to society being better.
Sure.
It seems like perhaps for
that's
females.
That's not a moral point, by the way. That's an absolutely empirical point.
Right.
That the people tend to be happiest and most prosperous when they have solid, stable families, and that really starts with mom and dad who are in love with each other.
Yeah.
So that's a good reason to do work on happiness and love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one thing that you talk about that is so relevant for today, there was a line that I loved. The more you hate someone for their views, the more miserable you become. And this idea of contempt, if you feel it, and you are the one sort of throwing shame or contempt at another, you actually are less happy.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that and maybe why that's important for our world today?
Yeah. So the Buddha one time said that to hate another person is like picking up a hot coal to throw at him. The one who's burned the worst is you. That's true, of course. When you hate somebody, you want to actually hurt that person, but you're the one who's ultimately miserable, and you're the one who's actually suffered the most grievous harm. That's an empirical proposition that we've tested again and again and again in the social science world as well. Political hate, ideological polarization is one of the great storms that's been lowering American happiness. So we find in the data that American happiness has been falling for 30 years, usually little by little by little because of the retreat from institutions like faith and family and friendship and the relationship with work. But then the big storms are social media and loneliness, particularly exacerbated through the coronavirus epidemic, and political hatred. The activism in this country is just ruining our ability to love each other across ideological differences. Politics is not supposed to be this important. It has a cult-like standing, and part of the reason is because we've enabled activists to have an outsized role in our society, on our campuses, in our companies, in our communities. That's supplanted what people would be doing in their communities otherwise. Some people will say, I'm a really good citizen. I watch MSNBC every day. I know what's going on. It's like, that's not citizenship, man. There are people who would be going to church, but instead they're highly involved in ideological political causes. And we have these kind of malignant narcissists in organizations, large and small, in the workforce, on campuses, that are trying to conscript child soldiers into their culture war. The key thing to remember is this. When you hate somebody for political or ideological reasons, you become somebody's product. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. Somebody's profiting, and it ain't you. On the contrary, you're going to get a lot less happy and you're going to have fewer friends. You'll be fired up, and I can talk about what actually is happening in your brain. I mean, you get a lot of dopamine from hate, the anticipation of the reward of being right. You're going to wind up lonely. You're going to wind up paying a big, big price for indulging in that particular emotion.
Yeah, you talked about happiness in the U.S. having two aspects, which you kind of hit on, right? Which was this climate change issue, which is
Right.
basically like we decrease by what, 0.5% every
Yeah.
year, and then we have these storms, which would be
Yeah.
COVID, and then you talked about the dark triad too,
Yeah.
which to me sounded like a science fiction. I had no idea.
Yeah,
this
it's like
was
a cool
actually
band.
right? I was like,
We're the-
great.
we're the
Do I
dark
get
triad,
the shirt?
man.
Yeah, he's like, can you talk about what that is? Because
Yeah.
these days everybody's talking narcissist, and sometimes I
Yeah.
think, is that just us being narcissistic, thinking everybody else is a narcissist? What's actually going on?
Dark triad it's a term of art in the social science world among psychologists and behavioral economists, where three personality characteristics coincide. And this happens, by the way, in 7% of the population. No joke. Scott Barry Kaufman, who has that wonderful psychology podcast, he's sort of the world's leading expert on the prevalence. He'd be a great guest, actually. So the prevalence of this dark triad. The dark triad is to be above average in clinically identifiable narcissism, Machiavellianism, which is to say I'm willing to hurt or lie to you or in some way harm you for my own personal gain, and psychopathy, to have psychopathic traits, above average psychopathic traits, which really is not about being an axe murderer. It's about not having remorse. So in other words, it's all about me. I'm willing to hurt you, and I don't feel bad about it. That's 7% of the population. That's a problem. That's 1 in 14 people. Now, ordinarily, we shun them. For example, if they have a hard time getting by in the world, if they're cognitively not very gifted or whatever, then they'll commit crimes and they'll often wind up in jail. They certainly won't be hired. They won't stay married for very long, and we'll shun them. But in particular periods in American history, we find that people will be attracted toward dark triads. And these are these periods of bullying and polarization of a sort of acute populism across the political spectrum, where these people who are willing to say anything for their own personal gain, no matter how much harm it does, and are remorseless about it, will be rewarded. Now, the problem is that everybody listening to this right now, they're thinking about that person on the other side. It's unhelpful to be thinking about the person on the other side. Every time I write about this on social media, for example, people will say, yeah, well, and they if it's a bit liberal, they'll talk about Trump, and if they're conservative, they'll talk about, whoever, whatever politician. It's on your side. And that's the problem that we have. We have this epidemic of dark triad leadership in media, in politics, on campuses. There's a very interesting set of papers. There's research now about so-called virtuous victimhood. Virtuous victimhood is the phenomenon in which leaders will get their prestige from the grievance that they get from particular victimhood status. And that virtuousness will turn into a form of bullying. That's a classic dark triad form of behavior, and we see it again and again and again. I'm such a victim. Oh, woe is me. That gives me a whole bunch of points. That gives me a whole bunch of power. And we see it on both the right and the left. Right now, if people are listening, they're going, yeah, I see it on the other side. It's because you're not looking at your own side. And that's a big problem for this country. That's driving down happiness. That's driving down opportunity. It's creating polarization such that we can't make common cause to solve problems across the ideological spectrum.
Is it always a societal issue? Can it also be detrimental intrapersonally? And how do you determine if you are engaged with a dark triad?
Yeah, I do a lot of work on romantic love. It's one of the things that I do. My class at the Harvard Business School, it's called Leadership and Happiness. And the most popular unit of that class is how to fall in love and stay in love. And I talk about the brain a lot. I talk about both the psychology and the neuroscience of falling and staying in love. And it's obviously of intense interest to my 28-year-old students who are really good at business, but nobody's taught them about the business of life, really. And so they're thinking about that an awful lot. When I talk about the dark triad, man, that is like a big buzz. And I start hearing about it from students who are not in the class, who are coming to me and say, I think I might be living with a dark triad, professor. Can you help me? And you know it. Is the bottom line. Because generally speaking, dark triads, they present very favorably. They're very successful in the dating market, for example. They do unbelievably well on the apps. They do really well on the first and second dates. They do incredibly well because they're willing to do and say anything for you to fall in love. Why? Because then the hook is set. And once the hook is set, they're willing to exploit you. They'll leave you with a broken heart and an empty bank account. Almost everybody listening to us has had a romantic interaction with at least one dark triad. The problem is, especially women who wind up with dark triad after dark triad after dark triad. That's a pattern of behavior that becomes a pathology. And we see there's a lot of that. We shows up in the literature. There are dark triads who are women too. And so there are men who can do that. But men, generally speaking, break out of that pattern more than women do for whatever reason. You also find people who are in a work situation where their boss is a dark triad. And you can get into a situation where your political leaders are dark triads, or your media leaders are dark triads, or the culture is being generated largely online by dark triads. And that's a lot of what we find on social media.
Yeah, you said something like 7% of the population is a dark triad, but also 7% of the population is the amount of the population that is happy that we are in a culture war.
Yeah, so those are two different sets of data. So that, Scott Barry Kaufman's stuff about, the dark triad says 7%, and we see this in a lot of different data sources. There's also work from Tim Dixon, who has a group called More in Common, and he asks people in anonymous surveys, do you like or hate how polarized we become as a society? Do you wish that we were more one as a country, as a society? And you find that about 93% of Americans hate how divided we become as a country. That means that 7% don't hate it. I mean, who says, I kind of like how divided we become as a country? Well, I'll tell you who does that is somebody who's profiting from that. So no doubt there's a ton of overlap between those data sets.
You know what's interesting is we started running this screen when we hire people, which is that we look at their Twitter replies.
Yeah.
And what we found, I don't know if it's dark triad or not, but if it's largely negative
Right.
and trolling or hateful comments, there's a high correlation between them not working out well. And so we just,
for sure.
And so we just don't hire that
There's
anymore.
a lot of research on how people interact on social media, and you find that social media, it tends to reward dark triad behavior. There's a very famous paper in the Journal of Social Psychology called "Trolls Just Want to Have Fun," and it's about the fact that trolls tend to have psychopathic characteristics. They just do. Internet trolls do that. So one of the things that you should always ask on a first date, what do you do on social media? And they say, I just like to kind of throw bombs and create trouble and all that. Do not date that person. That person is going to, very, very likely, is going to be a big problem in your life. If you fall in love, woe be unto you.
God, I wish I knew this before. I got into 2 business deals with one.
But you didn't marry one,
no,
so
thank
good.
God, that's true.
Yeah.
No, he's not a troll. That is not. I've only ever trolled back, and I regret doing it.
Yeah.
Because now I'm like the fixation of this man's life.
Yeah.
It's like,
No. There's no margin in that, and you never
margin.
say to yourself, my only regret is I wasn't more of a jerk. You don't think that, and it's one of the things that I recommend to a lot of people is to look for opportunities where people are trolling you to respond the way that your mother would be proud of, and that will really boost your happiness. When you look at contempt in your ordinary life and use it as an opportunity to return warm-heartedness. You always feel better. You become more effective. You become more creative. You become more focused. This is an analgesic to ordinary life. Is to actually go looking for hatred and answer it with love. Your life will change.
That's
Oh
fascinating.
yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how much this works. I've had missionaries on both sides of my family, and it's weird because missionaries, they face intense amounts of rejection. Nobody's ever said, great news, there's missionaries on the porch, ever,
Nope.
right?
Nope.
But they're always happy. And the reason is because they believe they're bringing love and light where there's hatred and darkness. I mean, you can disagree with them, but that's what they honestly believe. And that's why they're happy. And so we can actually say, okay, I'm going to be a missionary for what I believe. I mean, not necessarily a religious missionary, although nothing wrong with that either. Missionary for love. And where do you go? You can't go where everybody's already perfectly loving. You go where they aren't. And you say, I'm going out there. I'm going out there.
Interesting.
And I'm going to bring love. I'm going to bring light. And if you make that your passion on social media, it can be a very generative, a very productive experience. And it truly will change your life.
Some of the studies that I read in your book were fascinating. I had just finished rereading Strength to Strength, so went back and reread Love Your Enemies.
You got my whole ouvre.
I know. I've been
Did you read Performing Arts in a New Era?
Not once.
2005,
Wow.
Genetic Algorithms and Public Economics.
None of those?
My
I bet
nerd
they're
credentials
riveting.
are impeccable.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
In your newest book, I like the line that Oprah said, which was basically that she always has a story and you always have a study.
Yeah.
But what I found online that's fascinating is in a world in which I think trust is disintegrated and people have a hard time trusting institutions, they have a hard time trusting individuals, there's such power in the studies and science
Right.
interwoven with story. And
For sure.
so there were a couple studies that I thought were fascinating, one in particular being the definition really of the book, which is, the 4 pillars of happiness, which you talked about that seem kind of obvious, but in a world in which common sense is not so common, perhaps aren't
Right.
so obvious. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah. So these are the practices, the habits that the happiest people have in common. We start off the book by defining happiness, which is not a feeling. Very important because emotional self-management is critical to living a good life. And if you're just hoping for happy feelings, this is not going to lead you to emotional self-management. So we start off with a proper definition, which is that it's the macronutrients of happiness or enjoyment and satisfaction and meaning. And we talk about, the difference between enjoyment and pleasure, about satisfaction, why it's hard to get and keep, why meaning tends to be so elusive. And then we say, okay, well, what are the practices that people have? What are the habits that people have in common who are getting a lot of those 3 macronutrients? In other words, they have a good balanced diet. Then we talk about the dishes in the happiness diet. And those dishes are faith, family, friends, and work. And we talk about each one. So faith doesn't mean my faith. I'm a Catholic. It's the most important thing in my life. But as a scientist, I know that for happiness, there are many paths that all have the same thing in common, which is transcendence. You have to transcend your own little psychodrama. Mother Nature wants you to think, Cody's the only thing in the world. The only thing in the world. And it's just tedious and boring and terrifying all at the same time, makes you feel dead inside. You need to transcend you. You need to get little. This is the point of these religious experiences from the happiness perspective. I'm not going to talk about the metaphysics, about what's metaphysically correct. That's a different discussion entirely. But for happiness, you can get that from religious or non-religious behavior. When I say faith, I mean a serious philosophy of life that shows you the grandeur of the universe and makes you little. That's important, whether it's reading the Stoics, like our friend Ryan Holiday likes to do, whether it's walking in nature before dawn in the Brahma Muhurta, that's the creator's time, whether it's studying the fugues of Bach, whether it's adopting a Vipassana meditation practice, or whether for me, it's going to Mass every day. You got to have something. So that's faith. Family life sounds sort of obvious, but 1 in 6 Americans is not talking to a family member because of politics today, which is the saddest datum in my whole field. We could cover the neurophysiology of why we need to be around our people and they need to be around us. We're a kin-based species, and we have neurophysiological ways to identify our kin and take pleasure in their company, but we know who they are, and it's important that we maintain those relationships. Friendships, I'm talking about real friends, not deal friends. A lot of people listening to this show, they want to be really successful. That is fantastic. I endorse that. I endorse the show. I endorse the philosophy. But be careful. You need useless people in your life. You need real friends who are useless, not just deal friends who are useful.
Yeah, explain that a little. I found that concept fascinating.
It's a hard one for a lot of us who work super long hours. I don't think I've worked less than 60 hours a week in my whole career, and I'm 60. Yep. That's a lot of hours that went into that. The result is that it's very easy for all of your social relationships to be useful in a kind of a utility sort of way to build up your career and your professional life. And that's what happens to a lot of very successful, hardworking people, that the last time they had real useless friends was in college, and they don't even know how to do it anymore. 60% of men my age, their best friend is their wife. 30% of their wives say their best friend is their husband.
That's not great.
It's not great. That's because these guys who are disproportionately people who have worked and worked and worked and worked and worked, have lost their chops for friendship. And that's a big problem. I work a lot with executives. I'm sort of the striver whisperer for happiness. They come to you for financial advice. They come to me for happiness advice.
Yeah.
I say, okay, take a piece of paper and have the 10 people that you spend the most time with on a given week. And then write R's and D's after their name. That's not Republican and Democrat. That's real and deal.
I did this exercise. It's scary.
A lot of D's in there.
A lot of
D's. Yeah. Your husband's a real friend, but he's useful. He's his family life and making your home and et cetera. But you need more. And what you find is that the happiest people, this comes from the Harvard study of adult development over an 85-year longitudinal study, the people who die happiest, most of them have a successful marriage and at least one intimate, real non-deal friend. So you got to go beyond just the person you live with, your happily married roommate. You got to go beyond that. And a lot of people have 5 or 6 by the time that they're old. But those are the predictors of the happiest life. That's in the friendship one.
It's not just are they real versus deal friends. Deal friends like, he can help me out. Arthur, he's going to be on my podcast. He's going to help me get more viewers. This guy's going to help me make more money. But the real friends, you also talk about the way that you speak and communicate with them is important, and how you are actually happier when you talk about one subject versus another.
Right. I have super close friends. Really, my closest friend is in Atlanta. And I've known him for many years. He was on my board at AEI, and I'm on the board of his foundation. But those are just pretexts for us to spend time together. I talk to him usually about once a week, and I see him in person at least once or twice a year. And when we talk, it's like, we got to talk about that thing, and we never get to it. What we talk about is our families. We're both grandfathers. We talk about our grandchildren. We talk about our shared Catholic faith. We talk about things that are important to us in the world. We talk about real things that actually really matter. And we don't talk about deal things at all. We would, but we don't get to it. And if we lived in the same city, which would be just wonderful, we would probably talk about deal things too. But the whole point is that real crowds out deal for these particular friends. And real is really about the love in your life and the things that you care about the most.
A couple other things I thought were fascinating, if people want to be tactical on happiness, is it looks like there were some studies that showed actual, let's say, spatial proximity, friends and family members that make you feel better, make you happier. What are some of the other kind of maybe not so thoughtful things that people can do to be happier like that?
So that you're talking about these epidemiological studies. There's the Framingham Heart Study, and that was in Framingham, Massachusetts, where they were looking at a longitudinal study over a long period of time about how people's heart health. Because this was, when it started, it was, the heart health was a really big deal. But then quickly they started to realize that they had data that they could measure all kinds of stuff with. And they found that the proximity to other people would infect you with good and bad things. So you find that people, if you're in physical proximity with people who are obese, you're much more likely to become obese. Around people who drink too much, you're much more likely to drink too much. And if you're around people who are happier, you get happier too, because we tend to mimic each other's behavior. As primates, we're prone toward mimicry is the way that this works. And you see people doing happy things and being happy about their lives, you're like, okay. And you do that too. They'll measure it. If you're within 1/2 mile of a happy family member, here's the percentage likelihood that you'll get this much happier within a particular period of time. That's how social scientists actually see the world, is in those kinds of metrics. But it's really interesting because what that shows us is that happiness is you can catch it. It's a virus. Unhappiness is also a virus, is what we find. So there's lots and lots of practical things that you can actually do, and that's what my work really is about. Is they're not hacks; they're just basic practices. I talk about the fact that, for example, humans have a tendency towards what's called the negativity bias, where because of our evolution, we reward resentment and negativity and fear and sadness and anger and disgust, because that's what keeps us alive. Positive emotions are nice to have. Negative emotions are critical for keeping you alive. So the result is we always see the glass as half empty. That's what we do because our ancestors didn't get eaten on a Pleistocene because they were alert and vigilant and negative and gloomy. It's like, today could be the last day. And so that passed on to you. You don't have to be that way because that's actually not accurate in the most prosperous, upwardly mobile, charitable, progressive society in the history of the world, aka the United States. Think about how much we talk down this country constantly. And it's just insanity. I mean, what other country would you bet on? What other country would you want to go to as an immigrant? I mean, come on. Are you kidding? And everybody kind of in their heart knows that our best years are ahead. I mean, the best times are coming. But no. It's just, this could be the last election. It's just nutty. One of the most practical ways to get happier is to be realistic about what's actually happening, to assess what's going on in your life and say, you know what, I have a lot more to be grateful about than to be resentful about. And so I'm going to write down the things for which I'm going to be grateful. That's the so-called gratitude list that people are actually talking about. But that's the neuroscience or the social science behind why that's an effective thing to do. You can raise your happiness between 10 and 25% within the next 10 weeks by just writing down and paying attention to the fact that you should be more grateful than resentful.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And theoretically, I mean, because that's higher than prescription antidepressants.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, this is the secret to getting happier. You won't be happy because cosmically happy, I believe, happens in heaven.
Yeah.
But as a social scientist, we all know that you have negative emotions for a reason, and as long as you're walking the earth, you're going to have them because there are threats. You're going to have negative experiences because not everything can go your way, and so you're going to feel unhappiness, and that's part of life, and that's healthy, and that's normal, and you learn from that, and that's completely okay. But to get happier, there's just all these incredible things that you can do, and they start with knowledge. It's more important for you to get knowledge about the science of happiness than it is to say, knowledge in pill form. Yeah. I mean, look, if you need to go to the doctor, you need to go to the doctor. I get it. I mean, mood disorders are no joke. Clinical anxiety, clinical depression, and generalized anxiety are no joke. But the most powerful tool that we have at our disposal is knowledge about this. This has been revolutionary for me in my life. I mean, I study happiness because I wanted to be happier. I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy as I should have been. I have the best life. I mean, I have a happy marriage and my kids are healthy and my life is good. I live in America, for Pete's sake. And I said, this isn't right. This isn't right. I'm going to go teach the science of happiness at Harvard because I want to emphasize this in my own life, share it with other people, and get happier as a result. And my happiness is 60% higher than it was 5 years ago. Wow. It's crazy.
What I thought was interesting too is like when you can get to the definitions of something, then you can more easily understand the context, it seems. And when I was listening to some of your work on hope versus optimism, it rang true for me. I mean, I remember I was talking to Ryan Streeter, head of
Yeah.
Civitas, who we're both, friends with. You're very close, and Pano, who heads University of Austin, as the dean there.
Pano Canellis,
Yes.
University of Austin in Texas, wonderful organization. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to maybe give a little song and dance to the students, and I was asking Pano, what should I talk about? And so my mind, because I'm kind of a financing nerd, I'm like, we could talk about like how you could get equity in a business, and here's how we could break it down, and we could do these spreadsheets. And Pano was like, okay. And he's like, you could do what kids really need more than anything right now. And I was like, okay, what's that? And he's like, teach them how to hope. And I was like, that sounds fluffy. I don't know how to do that. And you unlocked it a different way for me by explaining what happened during Viktor Frankl's concentration camps and the difference between hope and optimism.
Right. Optimism and hope are often thought of as synonyms, and they're not. Optimism is a prediction. There's this funny thing in the psychological literature called the Stockdale paradox. And James Stockdale was an admiral who was captured during the Vietnam War, and he was in the Hanoi Hilton. He was in in prison, in a prison camp, and kept by the North Vietnamese. It was a bad situation. He noticed this weird thing. The optimists died. They died of a broken heart. He said, it's like, oh, we're going to be out by Thanksgiving. And then Thanksgiving came and went. Oh, yeah, out by Christmas, Easter. And they got more and more and more despondent because their predictions didn't come true. The important thing to keep in mind is that you don't know if things are going to be okay or things are not going to be okay, but there's something you can do, and that's hope. Hope is this active virtue. So among Christians, it's a theological virtue. Faith, hope, and love. The whole idea that there's something can be done and you can do it. I don't know what the odds are, but I can actually do something that empowers you to act in a particular way. So the key thing is to say, okay, what can you do today? So when things are going rotten, and in everybody's life, there's grief and there's sadness and there's difficulty and there's barriers, and you wake up each day and say, okay, I got it. I have the situational awareness of these things. It's not perfect. What can I do today? What can I do today? That's a very hopeful way to start your day, and you will start empowered. That's incredibly important, as opposed to indoctrinating yourself with a bunch of false propaganda. It's going to be great today. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Yeah. You can be a pessimistic, hopeful person, as a matter of fact, and you'll be a lot better off than if you're a hopeless optimist. Which means I think everything's going to be okay, but there's nothing I can do.
I get it. So optimism is much more outcome based and
just prediction.
External.
It's just predicting the future, and we don't know the future. We don't know the future. I don't know what's going to happen. We're recording this in New York City. There's a lot of buses running through red lights out there. I don't know, but I know that I can actually keep my eyes open, look both ways, and not jaywalk too terribly much. I have hope that there's a lot that I can do, even though I don't know what's actually going to happen.
Yeah, personal agency. Speaking of what's happening, what's going on with women these days? We used to be a lot happier than men.
Yeah.
You're like, where do we start?
I know.
Bring out the list. But I was looking at some of your research, and it seems like women, across multiple different categories used to be happier than men.
Right.
Now we're not.
Right.
How bad are we? What's the difference? And what happened?
So that's a good question. What happened? So to a little bit of background on that, for the longest time, I always found that women were happier than men. And a lot of ways to look at that. Women at different ages were happier than men. Women of all different marital status were. Single women were happier than single men. Married women. Widowed women, way happier than widowed men.
I told my husband that one.
Yeah, I told my wife that. She's like, huh. And the only group of women that were unhappy were divorced women, and typically is because they had custody of the kids, and that's incredibly stressful to be a single parent, because working and kids, et cetera. That doesn't mean that there's not a lot of meaning. It just means that day-to-day enjoyment can be attenuated. But what you've found is that over the past 20 years or so, women have converged downward to the unhappiness levels of men. So they've converged, and at first I thought, great, men are getting happier. Women are getting unhappier is what we find, and they're getting unhappier very quickly. And so there's a lot of different theories of it. You find that there's a lot less family formation going on. There's a lot less marriage that's actually happening. You find that men and women are diverging politically really, really quickly. You find that women are getting much more politically progressive and men are getting more conservative. And so the result of it is that, especially in a culture where people think that the most important thing for making a romantic match is, voting for the same party idiotically, as if that, so you'll find that they're less and less and less likely to find somebody that can actually love them as a person because of these differences in ideology, and they're just diverging in these particular ways. I think that a lot of the activism culture is particularly targeted at women. Social media is especially targeted at young women. It's creating a whole lot of misery with the social comparison, political hatred with the sense of loneliness that's crawling out of people's smartphones. And all these things together are creating an epidemic of unhappiness among women, especially young women in our society today.
Yeah, I always like to remind people that I have an inordinate amount of face paint on anytime I come on these because, you know, you see people on stages like this and we look okay, but, you know, there's eyelashes on here, there's a ton of face paint, there's, you know, it's not natural. And I think it's important that we kind of tell people that. I don't have the balls, like some of the women are like, I'm just not gonna wear makeup. And I'm like, the thing is I'm not, but I will at least be honest about it. You know?
That's actually an easier thing for men, to be sure. But of course it's different because men are peacocking in different ways.
That's true.
They're doing different kinds of flex, having to do with their ability, their financial capabilities, their prowess in the workspace. More and more, by the way, with this highly visual media that we have, more and more men feel like they have to be in the gym all the time. Yeah. It's the craziest thing that you actually see. Guys my age are just working out constantly is what there's pressure even on that front, but it's true. And part of the reason is because otherwise we will be judged by a large public audience, which we shouldn't care about, but our brains don't know that. Yeah. Our brains are, there's an interesting little piece of the brain, part of the limbic system called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. And its whole job is to make you aggrieved and afraid of being rejected. And so you're sad when your beloved breaks up with you, and you're afraid when you think you're going to be tossed out of your tribe. And there's a reason for that, because in the Pleistocene you would have walked the frozen tundra and died alone if you got rejected. So you need an onboard capacity to make you not want to be rejected. And the way that we use that today is to want to be accepted by millions of strangers on social media because of the way that we look, which is complete insanity, and yet that's how our brains are wired.
Yeah. Do you think that some of the stuff that's going on with women has anything to do with, sometimes I think about it like the food pyramid. It's like, we were told for 30 years or however long.
Eat a lot of carbs.
Right. Eat a lot of carbs. Meat's actually not good.
Yeah.
And the more processed, the better. And so you did the thing. You followed the pyramid, and you had a way of life that you thought was actually healthy, but which isn't. And then I look at women today, and sometimes I wonder, and I'm an example of it. I'm a girl boss, if that's the phrase you want to use. I'm a working woman, but we're certainly working a lot more too. Right. Have you seen any studies that show women's happiness while working? I know online there's this big trad wife sundress movement. What does the data tell us about that?
Well, we know historically that women have always worked. There's nothing. I mean, that's like that. That's historically anomalous. The idea that women not working and staying home. There's this pining for the 50s or something. And look, everybody's got to do their own thing for sure. But if you go back thousands of years, women work. They're working on farms. What's historically anomalous is the idea that as soon as you get married, you wouldn't work. And again, more power to you if that's what you're going to do. But if we're just going to look at history, that's kind of the way it is. What we do find is that when work crowds out love relationships, you're going to be in trouble. We don't really have that much sympathy for men who do that because, we valorize that when men are workaholic. Workaholism is just any other sort of addiction that we have. But when you drink a bottle and a half of Jack, nobody says congratulations. Your prowess at drinking is unparalleled. I really admire you. But if you work 16 hours for your startup, people will say that's unbelievable. It's just wonderful. You'll get on the cover of Fortune magazine. But that's just straight up addiction, straight up addictive behavior. What you find is that now that's infecting women as much as it's infecting men. And what that is a relationship with work that crowds out other relationships that bring more happiness. Yeah. You need a relationship with the divine. You need a relationship with your family. You need a relationship, a real marriage, not a fake marriage, not a roommate marriage where you're just like, hey, it's not good enough. You're not going to be happy, and you don't need a nerd at Harvard with a PhD like me to tell you. Everybody knows that who's watching us. You need real friendships, and real friendships take time. And what we've found is that as the role of women in the workforce has increased to the point where we have workaholism rates among women that are as high as they are among men, that you're going to see precipitous declines in happiness. I don't think that this is especially gender-based. I just think that we have we have a problematic relationship with the way that we objectify ourselves.
Interesting. You have a word that I'm going to mispronounce, speaking of relationships. Homophily? Is that right?
Homophily or homogamy. Yeah,
nailed
for sure.
it. Okay, so
well played.
So I have these two girls that come and do my hair and makeup each week.
Yeah.
And
Looks
they're
great.
in their 20s.
They did a great job.
I said,
I don't have any of that.
So
I was not fishing for a compliment about
I just wanted to give you
Thank
one.
you. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
I could tell you needed it.
That's right. Let's go lift weights.
So yeah, you do a lot of that too. So these two women are younger, like early 20s.
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me, I'm 37 and I've been married for a while now. And I think actually my husband and I were just texting, like our partnership is the best thing about life.
Yep.
Everybody always told me marriage was really hard. I'm divorced previously, so I didn't do it right once. And now that I'm in it, I'm like, it makes everything easier. I would give up all the money that I had.
Yeah.
Because I think I could earn it back. Too.
Well, if they say money always
But-
returns to its rightful owner.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not.
Partnership is really, really special to me. And these young women, when they come and talk to me, often say, I asked one of them the other day, both liberal.
Yeah.
They're young, they're beautiful, they're
Right.
smart, they own their own business because
Right.
they do this for a living. And yet both of them said that they wouldn't date somebody that was a member of the Republican Party.
Or who voted for Trump.
Right. I didn't ask about Trump specifically, but I could assume.
Probably stronger.
Yeah, probably stronger.
Yeah.
And so talk about compatibility, homophily, and what actually matters.
Yeah. So homophily is the tendency for us to sort in groups where we are an awful lot alike and fall in love with people who are just like us. Now, there's a natural narcissistic tendency to want to fall in love with ourselves. The problem is that when we can curate our relationships through dating websites, then we're actually able to set the criteria for people that we're going to meet. And what people have a tendency to do is to say, okay, well, what's the most important thing? Compatibility. What's compatibility? Sameness. Okay, so I vote this way and I like this food and I live in Austin and I listen to this kind of music and and I like to travel and blah, 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 blah. And that's the kind of man or woman I want to meet. And that's your sibling. And that's not hot. And so what you find in the data is that people have more and more and more variety in the dating markets, and they're less and less attracted to the people that they're meeting. This is and you know the apps have eaten every other way, and so you find that 59% of relationships start on the apps now. 59%. That's a lot. And the trouble is that they tend to be unstable, and they're based on relatively low levels of attraction. I mean, there can be, short-term sexual attraction. I mean, dating is a serious business. This is an audition for life partner if you're doing it in a way that's actually going to lead you to the most happiness. This is not a moral proposition, it's just a science proposition, basically. Mm-hmm. And this is almost the worst way that we can do it, is by trying to troll in a pool of people who are look like us. You need somebody who completes you, not somebody who mimics you. That's what you need. That's the reason that matchmakers are really successful, that parents can be really successful, that blind dates tend to be more successful, because your friends are like, I know it. Codie's got this thing, but there's this other guy, and she could really use that. That would be. They think about a fit as opposed to two puzzle pieces that are the same. They don't fit together, and that's a lot of what's actually happening here. Now, homophily and homogamy, people love people just like themselves. That's one of the reasons that we have more and more inequality in our society as well, because you find increasingly that people meet in college. And if they're at elite colleges, they're meeting at elite colleges. There are a lot of couples at the Harvard Business School, and they come out and they're both doing these super high-powered jobs, and so the result of that is you have more couples that are more alike with respect to their abilities and their educational aptitude as well.
Yeah, what's interesting is my husband's so different than I am. Military, very strong guy, could care less about money. I mean, honestly, doesn't care at all about making money.
Military. What branch?
He was a Navy SEAL. He cares about service and purpose. He could be paid $50 million, and if it didn't have service and purpose, he would be unhappy.
Yeah.
And it's been incredibly complimentary, because I am in a chase for money and success somehow, and he is in a chase for service and purpose. And when we pair the two together,
he got a nice house and doing all kinds of.
He got a nice, and he can temper my crazy, and I can temper his in some way.
This is very important to recognize, and people need a lot more of this. It's really, now part of the problem also is in our society today that we've become less and less tolerant of people who are not like us, and so couples won't get along precisely because they're complementary, and that's a big problem. You find that, by the way, the happiest couples, they tend to be one introvert and one extrovert. And one is the threat spotter and the deep thinker, and the other one is the one who's like, the big personality and make sure that everybody gets out of the house and goes to parties.
Yeah.
That's a very stable thing. But if you're a narcissist, if you've been brought up in a culture that encourages you to be narcissistic, that you're thinking about your own identity all the time and me, you're not going to like somebody who's that much different than you. You're not going to have the initial attraction to that kind of person. And the result is that you're only going to keep going out with your doppelganger and wondering why you don't feel long-term attraction to the person.
Fascinating, because nobody ever taught us that.
No.
In fact, people said opposites attract, but it was almost like in a bad way.
Yeah.
Like they attract, but be careful.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's complete opposites. There has to be some level of compatibility. I mean, if you're a serious Catholic, you should find somebody who's a good Catholic. And that means, by the way, go someplace where they are. You're not going to meet them on the apps. You're going to meet them at church. It's one of the biggest pieces of advice that I get to people. It's like, I'm on the apps and I get a lot of dates, but I don't like anybody that I meet. It's like, maybe all the people you're dating, because it's the apps, are just looking for a fling. Maybe you should go someplace where people congregate who want the same thing that you do. Where might that be?
Yeah.
And we start thinking through institutions. And, a lot of it is a lack of imagination for people who are of dating age. Thank God I didn't have that. I've been married 33 years. And, it's a long time. I haven't been on a date in, 35, 36 years.
We've been on lots of dates, just not a new person.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. Okay. Exactly right. We had a lot of date nights. It's true. When our kids were little.
You mentioned earlier, you're sort of a whisperer of successful people.
Striver whisperer.
You're the striver whisperer. We were talking beforehand, like I saw Rich Roll the other week, and, I was like,
phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, really.
He's a visionary,
like him.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really, measured and calm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
He felt a little bit like a weighted blanket.
We just got back from India together.
That's what he told me.
Yeah.
I go, hey, that bracelet's cool. What's going on with that? And he goes, well, it was from hanging out with the Dalai Lama. And I go, okay,
Tell me more.
I immediately thought of you. And so he gave you all the credit and said, Arthur brought me along. But I was just wondering, like Dalai Lama, Oprah, you've met all the presidents basically through AI. Do you get starstruck by these people? Did you freak out when Oprah called?
Well, I didn't believe it. I mean, I thought it was somebody punking me. It's like, wow, somebody does Oprah's voice really well.
Wait, so what happened? Like your phone rang and it was Oprah?
Not exactly. I mean, what happened was that Oprah, it turns out that she reads my column in the Atlantic, which you don't know if you have. Thanks, appreciate it. But we have 500,000 readers. You don't know who's in the reader base. And during the coronavirus epidemic, she was reading it every week. And then she read From Strength to Strength in 2022. And she called me to be on her podcast, her team and my team, et cetera, et cetera. And, the first time I talked to her, it was a little starstruck because I've been hearing that voice my whole life. Yeah. My wife learned English by watching the Oprah Winfrey Show. Whoa. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. It's the whole thing. But very quickly, you're talking to another person. Very quickly, that's what it comes down to. We all have the same drives and desires and needs. And we have a tendency to objectify other people. And that's the problem. So in my line of work, I get to work with a lot of people who are quite prominent because, and people who aren't. And they're just all the same. And the real gift that you can give anybody, no matter how famous they are, is to treat them like a human being, a beloved child of God, somebody who has the same needs that we all do, which is just to be loved and heard and respected and just to be a friend.
And the Dalai Lama, you've continued to go back to meet with him for
11 years.
A long time.
Yeah.
Different religious backgrounds and faiths.
Mm-hmm.
What keeps you going back? Like I hear when you meet with the Dalai Lama, you could ask him a question, but he's going to answer it sort of how he wants to.
Yeah, he's going to say what you need to hear. So the Dalai Lama is the most intuitive person I've ever met, and he's become a beloved mentor and teacher to me over the past 11 years. I've had a lot of interaction with him. We've written together, and he believes we've known each other for many, many years, a long, long time. Wow. And so the first time that I met him, I noticed that he was studying me to tell me what I needed to hear, notwithstanding what I asked him the first time I interviewed him. And that has continued apace. He's 88 years old. He's turning 89 on July 6th. So everybody mark the calendar and say a prayer for the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama, in his presence, you think you're seeking something from him. You're being sought by him and his wisdom. This is true in our lives. For all of us, we think we're seeking something, and we seek and we seek, and we're frenetically running around looking for it. You need to stop and listen, because then the thing that's seeking you can find you. That's the secret to actually finding your place, your metaphysical place in the world, your cosmic place in the world. To find the basis of your peace and contentment is allowing yourself to be found. And people don't trust that in this world that's so full of stimulus. And look, if I'm just going to read 1,000 books, and I'm going to be very online, and I'm going to listen to every possible podcast, and they should listen to yours. But the result is that what we're not good at anymore is stopping and allowing ourselves to be sought. That's what we need more of. The advice I wind up giving to people is getting up an hour and a half before dawn. It's the Brahma Muhurta, the creator's time. And going outside when it's cool and dark and walking for an hour without your device, and you can hear the crunch of the gravel on the trail beneath your feet, and to be actually alive and to learn how to do that. For people who will write to me, they feel lost after college. It's like, I feel lost. I don't know what I want to do. I was supposed to know, and I don't know. I say, you need Brahma Muhurta. You need the creator's time. You need to actually allow yourself to be found. And the way that you're going to do that is what people have always done. You need a pilgrimage before dawn. I'll have very specific examples of that, but the underlying principle is what I learned from the Dalai Lama, which is that you need to listen as opposed to speaking so that you can hear what it is that you're supposed to hear, and it will come to you.
Your voice is so unique, and I think in this day and age, these themes are pervasive throughout society that we need an answer like yours too, which is simple but also very complex, love and happiness.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about getting the biggest microphone out there, the presidency?
Well, you don't just get the presidency, Is America ready for a bald president? Every day I start my day with the same prayer, Lord, guide my path. What do you want from me today? I want to be God's instrument to bring love and happiness to as many people as I possibly can. That's my mission, to glorify God, to serve others, to have an adventure while I'm actually doing it. And I don't know what that's going to take. If I had known that, I would have been blown away. When I was in my 20s, I was playing the French horn in the Barcelona Orchestra. And I was being a college professor, and I was running a think tank, and now I'm doing this happiness mission. I don't know what the next chapter is going to bring, but I'm open to everything. That seems like an unlikely next chapter. But the truth of the matter is that if I feel like I'm called, I'm listening. I want to be sought by the divine wisdom to do what actually will lift people up and bring them together in bonds of happiness as much as I possibly can. Whatever that path is, I'm gonna walk it.
That's so good. When you speak, you can hear the musician in you. I'm sure a lot of people tell you that. Your intonation and the way you stop and pause.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You talk a lot about the sort of the second stage, and you call it something else.
Second curve.
And what to do when you've sort of already had your first iteration, your first career, your first identity. And I was going back and reading Strength to Strength and joking with you about how those first 3 chapters are always so hard for me to hear, because you talk about death fears. And I always thought that death fears were just, we're all scared of dying, and that was it.
No.
And that's not actually it. So can you talk about the varying death fears? I think I share a death fear with you. And then how you can get over that maybe with the second curve.
Everybody has a stated or unstated answer to the question, who am I? And that really is, like we would talk about it on modern college campuses, your identity. But it's a deep identity. It's not just my religious group or my political affiliation or my racial group or whatever it happens to be. It's deep stuff of who am I? How do I see myself? What is that person that I see in the mirror? What's the salient characteristic that defines me? And each one of us has those things. Typically has to do with one of our strengths, for example. That's your death fear, is losing you, the you-ness. Now, getting hit by a bus, I can joke about that all day long. I'm not afraid to. I'm a Christian. I've been practicing for death my whole life. It's okay. I had a very scary airplane experience. It was about 3 weeks ago when I was coming back from India, where I was with Rich Roll and Rainn Wilson and all these. We had this great thing with the Dalai Lama. It was wonderful. And on the way back, I was on a 2-engine prop plane coming down from the mountains. And, about 15 minutes into the flight, the pilot said, we have a major technical malfunction. We're going to land right now. Prepare to land. And then all the flight attendants sat down and no eye contact, and I looked out the window. One of the propellers wasn't working. Yeah. And we landed. We had 15 minutes to think about it, is what it came down to. Okay, I know that, planes can, we had a rough landing, but the planes can run on one engine, but it was a dangerous situation. That wasn't scary. That wasn't scary. It gave me an opportunity to talk to the person who was sitting next to me, who said, grabbed my hand and said, tell me it's going to be okay. And I said, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. That wasn't hard for me. What's hard for me is losing the essence of what I think Arthur Brooks is, which is not important in the cosmic state of affairs, but it's my mind, and again, that's not important, because when I die, which I will, and I will be forgotten. Each of us has 8 great grandparents. How many can you name? First name, last name. 2, we're forgotten, and we're forgotten fast is the whole point. I get that. I totally get that. But losing the essence of who I believe that I am, what I'm able to do in our conversation today, the mission that I'm trying to bring to other people in this apostolate of love and happiness, that's all my brain. That's all my mind. My heart and soul are tied up in the way that I'm able to express ideas. Losing that. And to make things easier, we have early onset dementia in my family. Oof. So far, so good. That's all I can say is so far, so good. But when my mother was my age, she was profoundly demented. Cody, I will lay awake nights because that's my death fear. And I offer it up in my prayers. I really do. And my wife swears she will still love me if that befalls me at any point in the future. I believe her. But that's death for me, and I'm really, really afraid of that. Now, that's also life for me, because recognizing that, I can lean into that and pay attention to that and savor the days that I actually have where I truly am alive, and I can have this beautiful conversation that we're having right here, because this is the life that I want to lead. And furthermore, recognize that should that happen, that I still will be a beloved child of God. And so it's only in leaning into my death fear that can I be truly alive today.
So beautiful.
What's yours?
A lack of relevance.
Being forgotten?
Yeah. There's this Emma Bombeck quote that I go back to again and again, which is, at the end of my days, when I stand before God at the pearly gates, I hope I can say to him, I have nothing left, not one drop. I used everything he gave me. And I have this fear of not squeezing it all out. And what if I can't do it? And what if it's not enough? I'm an existentialist in some ways too. Like, I know that nobody's going to remember me even past 10 or 20 years, or definitely, past one generation of my kids.
Your kids for sure, your grandkids less.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what? 2 generations, you're gone. So at the end of the day, what does legacy really matter? But that's my fear, is what if none of it mattered and I was totally irrelevant? The
only way to deal with that is to lean into that. The only way is to envision that happening, to imagine that happening. This is how the Theravada Buddhist monks in Vietnam and Myanmar, when they have pictures, they have photos of dead bodies in various states of decay, and they stand in front of the photos and they say, that is me. It's only through the exposure, through the courageous exposure to your worst fear of death, can you conquer that fear of death and be truly alive today. And that's really important. And then, of course, offering it up in your spiritual life. Take that. I offer that up as a sacrifice.
That's so beautiful. Arthur, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Cody.
Little recap on my time hanging with Arthur afterwards. First of all, I think, God, there's so much I want to share with you guys that I couldn't, because we were talking about people behind the scenes. So I'm not gonna break his trust there at all, obviously. But it was really useful for me speaking to Arthur this week, because I had a tough week. I had this couple of these people on the internet that were not being very nice and were giving me a hard time. And it's annoying because I kind of know them through people and their competitors in an industry of one of the businesses I have. And so, I think they kind of have perverse incentives. And to be frank, whenever I see it, I get mad. Do you ever get mad when somebody talks shit about you or you hear about it and your immediate reaction is not like, oh, I bet they had a hard day. It's like, let's kill everybody, starting with them, and break their kneecaps. Maybe that's just me. But anyway, so, in my head, I'm thinking things like, these guys are such haters. They're just little ankle biters. They're mad at the success that we've had. They're just trying to glom on. The only way that they can get bigger is by, punching up, and I can't punch down. And it annoyed me because I'm human, and I'm sure you guys have had that same thing. Well, what was so useful for me in speaking to Arthur, and this one book, which you guys haven't read, maybe it's called Love Your Enemies. It's so worth it. Is as I was talking to Arthur afterwards, I was like, are you really this nice to people when they're mean to you? Because I've seen people be mean to Arthur live. And I'm talking about world leaders be mean to Arthur. And he said, try it and see what you think. And I kind of wrinkled my nose and thought, is there an option B? And you have this fear of rejection, right? Where when somebody's mean to you, are you going to be mean back to, or are you going to be nice back to them? And then they're going to take advantage of that. So anyway, so I did it. And you guys, damn if I didn't feel good immediately after about just spreading a little love instead. And basically I pinged one of them and said, hey, I saw some of the stuff you've been posting. I hope you're well. I wish you nothing but the best. I think that, some of the stuff you're doing is really cool. I'm bummed you feel this way about it. I at least appreciate that you read my stuff. And,
I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And I just left it like that. And I wasn't like snide or snarky about it. I just really tried to feel this feeling of empathy for them. And it made me feel incredibly better. Now, I don't think this means that you're not still going to get hate. You are. I think the reason we're all on this planet and you are here uniquely is because you need to go through these trials and tribulations to become a better human. And that's the entire purpose of this game we call life. And yet, if I can sit in what I call this like seat of empathy instead of this seat of contempt, it turns out I feel better. And I lost sleep the other night thinking about it instead. And once I had flipped the switch, I slept like a baby last night, you guys. I didn't think about it at all. And it reminds me of this belief that, you know, those problems that you have in your head, are they real? Or are they a series of potential imaginations that are keeping you up like a scary movie that you felt in your body, but you know could never actually be true? How much of the things we worry about are just our scary movies in our head, are just the residual effects of your brain telling you that there's some horror that could happen? But in fact, after you watch The Ring, a chick never comes out of your mirror with crazy hair and tries to murder you. It's just your brain having these signals in life because it's trying to keep you alive after hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. And I hope you get that same thing from Arthur. One of the other things I took away from him as I was sitting talking to him afterwards is how this podcast is teaching me one thing. Most of the people that have incredible things in their life and that are at the top of their game that I've met thus far are also incredible people. I kind of thought that saying was true, don't meet your heroes. You guys, I totally disagree. I am sure some of them are going to suck. And yet, not one of them has. So from like Rich Roll to Arthur Brooks to, you know, meeting some of my all-time legends, I think it might be true that the better a human you become, the more successful you become at whatever aspect of life that you want. Now, these just happen to be monetarily and maybe fame successful and big thinking successful humans. But I do think that there's a correlation, and we were fed a lie, which is never meet your heroes. Meet your heroes. I bet they're better than you even think. Or you're picking the wrong heroes, and maybe that says something else. The last thing is that when you meet your heroes, if you can take a moment afterwards and pause and reflect. So I do this new thing right now on Twitter called Lessons from the Road. And Lessons from the Road is essentially every single week, because I'm running around often to new cities. Like I'm in New York City this week. I'll be in Arizona and I was in DC. Every day at the end of the day, I do this tiny little practice, which is in my notes right here in my phone. You can see this if you're on YouTube. I write down from every meeting I have notes and thoughts I have afterwards. And what's fascinating about it is the lessons stick more when you write them down. Just like when you read a book and you highlight and you take notes, you're more likely to actually keep that content and that information in your brain. How much more likely? 2 to 3 times more likely. So if life is really just a giant book that you are reading, learning from, why would you not want to take some notes while you're on this road of life? And so this week I did exactly that. I wanted to tell you a funny story to close this out. So I'm in New York City. I love New York City. I'm walking in Central Park in the spring, best place in the world in the spring. I'm like enjoying life. I'm listening to Arthur's book on my headphones. I'm kind of preparing for the interview. And as I'm walking along, like, you know, the smell of flowers in the air, I look over, and just as there only could be in New York City is a guy who pulls his pants down and starts, you know, yanking himself. He's basically jacking off. I'm like, oh, New York, that's something else. So I go and walk around the guy and think, well, it's kind of gross, whatever. I keep going. But New York's so great because one of those pedicab drivers, you know, who has like the little bicycle cab, you know, kind of like a big immigrant dude, yells over at the guy and he's like, what the fuck's wrong with you, man? You know, pull up your pants. That's disgusting. Put that thing away. Nobody wants to see that. What kind of sicko are you? And I'm kind of looking at the pedicab driver like, yes, that's right. You get him. And so I look over to the guy, you know, he shames the man. He pulls his pants off. He like waddles off to go be a creep somewhere else. And I say to the guy, thanks for doing that. And he looks over at me and he goes, honey, I know you wish it was me, and said, winks, drives off. And I just thought, fucking New York City. Never take yourself too seriously. Maybe be a little nicer to humans and write some lessons down from the road. Until next week. Oh, if you guys haven't written a review or shared the pod, do me a favor. It'd be a big fucking deal if you shared this deal with other people. So please share the pod. That is how this thing grows. It's super hard to grow podcasts, like incredibly hard to grow podcasts. So anything you can do to share and review the pod, you'd be my favorite little human. Okay, see you next week. Bye, everybody.
That I have it, you know that I got it. No need to look all in the bag. Stunting like this because I work so hard. I'm the best. I only speak fast.
Chris Voss is one of the FBI's former lead hostage negotiators. He has negotiated with terrorists like ISIS. He has stopped live hostage situations. He has also negotiated across some of the biggest boardrooms and billion-dollar companies all around the world. If you haven't read his book, Never Split the Difference, you should absolutely read his book. It's one of my favorite books when it comes to negotiating. And every time I speak to Chris, my mind gets blown wide open with new ways to make more money and get people to do the things that I want them to do. This podcast has all of that. He has stories in here I've actually never heard him share before anywhere. And he has things that you can take today to make you more and also to make you maybe even a better human in how you communicate with those you love and those you don't like very much. Without further ado, my friend Chris Voss. What I wanted to talk about to you today is, like, we've been talking a lot lately and you've been everywhere, Prague, Helsinki, all across the world. And I was wondering, what are you talking about now? Like, what are you obsessing on?
Well, more ways to help people understand why this works. And then a talk I just gave in Riyadh, which, by the way, Saudi these days is fascinating, fascinating. I think they told me 60% of the country is 35 and under. Like youngsters that want to get at it, that care less about the past and more about the future, which is what that age group's about. Like, we don't care how you guys did in the past. We want to see what's the best way to do it going forward. So what I talk to them a lot, particularly in the Middle East, like, why are we all the same and yet simultaneously all different? Which was, at one point in time, I thought it was an academic distinction that just made academics happy to talk about, the difference between feelings and emotions. The first time somebody brought that up, I thought, I don't care what the difference is. I'm a layman. I make stuff work, and we're going to use the black swan skills whether or not there's a distinction between feelings and emotions. I don't care. And so then a friend of mine, Eric Barker, wrote a book called Barking Up the Wrong Tree, and a blog by the same name, and he's written that different cultures have terms for feelings that other cultures don't have. Like in this island of South Pacific, they don't even have a term for this feeling or emotion. So how do you explain that? And then the consistent multicultural experts who say, yeah, you gotta understand Arabs, you got to understand Germans, the difference between Germans, Italians, Arabs, all this. And my response to that is like, look, dude, you're just keeping yourself employed over nonsense. So what's the answer? Or the hypothesis, which I haven't seen it how you prove it, but I'm not seeing anybody disagree, that you're born with 5 basic emotions. It's original equipment. You come to planet Earth with 5 core emotions. And I think they're anger, sadness, disgust, happiness, and I can't remember what the other 1 or 2 are. And the only argument I'm seeing is whether there's 5 or there's 7. And is it happiness or joy? But I'm not seeing anybody contend with that. So part 1, that's why we're all the same. Because you're human, period. You're born with these emotions. Now, me being an observer of navigating them, my first observation is 4 out of the 5 are negative. Only 1 is positive. And the Black Swan approach is let's deactivate the negatives, and then the positives will take off on their own, which is the case. That's why we got the skill of the accusations audit, listing the negatives, and then why, if you're not angry yet, I might say to you, this is going to make you angry. And it doesn't plant anger, it inoculates you from it. So, we got a strategic advantage as soon as you understand this. But then, as you go through life, your emotions interact with your experience, creating feelings, which then begins to explain there's a detachment disorder syndrome of people that aren't held enough in the first year of their life. Most commonly shows up with orphans because they're in an orphanage, prior to probably this century. They didn't know they need to hold them. They didn't understand detachment syndrome, and a lot of people that were adopted in the past, they get to their mid-teens, their parents adopted them at age 2, 3 maybe, showed them nothing but love, but in the mid-teens they're lying, they have an detachment syndrome. Like, where did this come from? First year of life.
I heard that too with preemie babies. Like, they originally said you can't touch the preemie babies because bacteria and they have compromised immune system.
Right.
And then they tried to study, I think it was here in New York, where they allowed for touch, like for an hour a day, just holding them. And the preemie babies grew faster and survived more just from human touch.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
Yes. So, but that's you interacting with the world. The explanation for sociopaths the Bureau's always tried to figure that out when we're how does one become a serial killer? What happened? And one of the hypotheses is when they were 5, 6, 7 years old, they did something, made a mistake, parents punished the hell out of them. 3 months later, they made the same mistake, parents didn't do anything. What's that teach a child? There are no rules. So, but then that's, again, you interacting with the world. So, yes, we're all the same and we're all different, but if I understand the fundamental rules of how to navigate emotions, no matter where you grew up, no matter what your ethnicity, your culture, your diet, your religion, I know that you've got these 5 core emotions. And so empathy, tactical empathy, works with Arabs, works with Persians, works with Latinos, because you're a human being. So in pointing that out these days and what I'm talking about, it makes it easier when I'm in Riyadh and it's an international audience. And they go like, well, you're an American. It's an American book. This is an American methodology. And I'm like, no, it's not. As a matter of fact, it's human. And so that's why I'm talking to people about this a lot.
What exactly is tactical empathy and why does it matter?
It's effectively proactive listening based on patterns of behavior that are predicted by things like your 5 core emotions and neuroscience. Now, originally, empathy was originally designed to not be sympathy. It's been contorted, convoluted into usage. These days, people say if you have empathy, that means you sympathize, you have compassion. Empathy is just observing the other person's emotions, and where it's you getting out of the way. Empathy from an Israeli to a Palestinian is for the Israeli to say, you hate us because you think we're a colonizing power that's bent on your extermination. That's not agreement. That's observing the other side's point of view. Palestinian to an Israeli. The world persecuted you. You feel that this is your homeland, which was taken away from you 2,000 years ago. Ultimately, there was a global effort to exterminate you, perpetrated by the Nazis in the 1930s. Most of the world stood back and watched. And then finally you had, after all these years, you finally have a homeland, and this is the only place you feel safe. There was no agreement from either side on that. That's empathy. That's stating the other side's perspective, and that's the true application of empathy. We called it tactical empathy originally because it's a little why you tell a SEAL guy, no, we're not teaching you yoga breathing. We're teaching you tactical breathing.
That's so good.
And then the guy go like, oh, okay, I'll do tactical breathing. I'm not doing yoga, but I'll do tactical.
That's right.
So we're trying to make the term more usable.
I like that. It's interesting because I was actually talking to Chris, my husband, about this the other day, that I remember when I was a journalist, and at the time I was talking to cartel members. And these were young cartel members, so, they were really human. They were like young guys at a club. You could find them often by their tattoos and some of the outfits that they would wear in northern Mexico. And these are people that have done categorically awful things, right? Rape, murder, violence, law breaking. And I remember at the time talking to them and saying to a girlfriend afterwards, because we were writing a story, like, it's fascinating because I can understand why they are the way that they are based on the conversations that I have with them. And her response was, why the fuck would you talk to somebody like that? That's like talking to a white supremacist. Like, why would you even want to understand where they came from? And I thought that was really interesting. Like, how do you talk to somebody that you physically, like, viscerally disagree with, and should you?
Yeah, yes, yes, you can, and yes, you should. And you don't equate understanding with agreement. And most people have trouble drawing that distinction. And that was actually as an FBI hostage negotiator, that's the first time they'd teach us. Because how the hell am I going to agree with the guy on the other side? I'm Al-Qaeda on the other side, ISIS on the other side. How am I going to agree with them? I'm not. However, on behalf of the American people, you guys are putting me in there to have an influence on his behavior. And so if I'm going to get in my way, then you should fire me. And I actually learned that previous to that on the hotline, suicide hotline. Mm-hmm. If, you don't believe in suicide at all. I don't, for religious reasons and spiritual reasons. So then what are you going to do? Get on the phone with somebody who's suicidal and be judgmental, tell them they're doing the wrong thing? It's not going to help. It doesn't help anybody. It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
So when you can decouple those, then actually you give yourself the ability to influence people in a way nobody else can. And I was kicking this around just the other night with Derek Gaunt, head of my training. We teach curiosity as the ultimate attribute for you to make you smart and more resilient, or even anti-fragile, as Nassim Nicholas Taleb would say. So curiosity could be a very self-centered thing to do. Simultaneously, I can open anybody up, like anybody, with my curiosity, because curiosity is impossible to resist. And so you can talk to a member of the cartel and they will not be able to resist your curiosity, because you're not judging, since you're not agreeing, then you've got no problem internally. You're not violating any of your core values to talk to them, because you're not agreeing with them. But they will open up to you in ways they will not open up to anybody else, which gives you a superpower.
That's so interesting. So today, we yell at each other on the internet. We have massive judgment for each other. We think it's wrong often to associate, date, or engage with somebody who has different views than us.
Right. Right.
And what we're actually doing is maybe killing our own superpower with that.
Well said. That's right.
Interesting. So if you wanted to influence somebody, what is the way to do it? Is the way to do it curiosity?
Yeah, and then they'll feel it.
Yeah.
And everything that they say, they'll be encouraged, because they want to tell you. Like, there isn't anybody out there that doesn't want to open up to you. They still want to be judged. And as soon as you're delighted, because curiosity is highly positive. I'm in a conversation, how we got into this with Derek, I'm in a conversation 3 nights ago with a woman. We're describing another conversation. I interviewed somebody for a marketing position on my team, and shortly I found out that they had a formative moment in their life was during a seance on a Ouija board in his ex-girlfriend's haunted house that she grew up in.
Okay.
And because I find that stuff out about people. I find a thread, I start digging in, I'm going to find out about you. And so this woman is listening to the conversation. She says, how do you get from an interview for a marketing job to a Ouija board in a haunted house? I'm like, it's, I don't know, it's just me doing my thing. She said, I don't see how you got there at all. So I turn the conversation on her to draw her out, and she's being very guarded because she knows I'm getting ready to come at her with the skills. And she's like, you can't do this on me. And so we started out asking her about her background, where she grew up, and her dad, and she's like, I don't know anything about that. I don't know how he got there. I don't know, and this and that. 15 minutes later, I'm getting a detailed history of this guy, her father, and it's utterly fascinating. It enlightened me about Cuba. It enlightened me about the relationship between Spain and Cuba. I found out that Castro's parents were Cuban. Now, he was born his parents were Spaniards.
Yeah.
Now, he was born in Cuba, but your first set of values from age 0 to 5 is what you grew up with in the house. So even though he's Cuban, he started the world with Spanish values because his parents were emigrated from Spain.
Oh, shit, those are my people. That's not good.
Which then puts a whole nother spin on the history. Now, I'm fascinated by this. I'm curious.
Yeah.
This is exactly the same thing that she told me 15 minutes earlier she didn't know.
Interesting.
Because she's blocking me. She wants to know, am I using a technique on her? And is it safe to open up? And am I going to criticize? But I'm fascinated. I'm curious, which then comes out in how I respond. She says something sort of innocuously about some member of her family. And I'm like, yeah, really? Like, how does that work? Because I know this and I know that. And how does it play in? I'm intensely curious. She opens up. And not only that, at the end of the conversation, she wants to have another one. Having been opened up against her will, she found the experience great, which means she doesn't resent it, which means she'll talk to me in the future, which means I can ask deeply core value-related questions in the future. If we're ever working on something together and we have an issue, she's going to trust me. This is the beginning of a great working relationship, great personal, whatever you want. And that's what curiosity does. You can open anybody on earth up with curiosity.
Do you think, I mean, young people, especially today, you know, there's lots of studies that show that we have less face-to-face communication than ever before, lots of async communication. We don't really like to pick up the phone. You know, we like to do a lot of text communication. Do you think young people are worse at communicating than prior generations?
Without question. Communication, emotional intelligence is an unlimited skill and a perishable skill. So if you haven't built it, you haven't built it. You know, it's like going to the gym. You're not going to be in shape unless you go to the gym. You stop going to the gym, you start sliding back. Now, that doesn't mean they can't do it. And so the interesting thing we found about that is the 1%ers, the top performers, in my view, no matter what the generation, they're all the same. Whether they're in 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. So they do have an innate curiosity and a desire for innovation. And a desire, first, to beat the competition. But then the real revelation is, how do I be the best I could be? That's the other thing I'm talking to people a lot about now, because you may be best in class, but for you, you're only at your C grade level. And you don't know it because you're best in class. So then how do you get to a level that you don't even know is there? And the top performers, as soon as they discover empathy, they're like, wow, this is cool. I can't get enough of this. And I got a 22-year-old, a 28-year-old, a 32-year-old. And when we're doing our live in-person training, they are some of the most interesting, because the world has said, well, you only want to text, so I'll just text you. Or, you know, the educational institutions, kids these days just want to be digital. And so we'll feed them what they want. And they don't know that they've been blocked from this. So when they discover communication, like, the world has opened up. So yes, they tend to be less skilled in it, but when they discover it, they're more delighted than anybody else is.
Interesting. Yeah, it's almost like we've forgotten what we knew.
Yeah.
So what about, I want to go back to something you said before because it's fascinating. You were negotiating with what we would call terrorists.
Bad guys, as bad as you can imagine.
What is your process for getting interested in them? Do you have to fake it for a point? Do you have to fake non-disgust? How do you have a conversation with somebody that you hate like a terrorist?
No, you don't have to fake it. You don't have to fake curiosity. Like, I didn't realize that at the time. Like, I knew how influential the process was from practice. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand all the moving parts at the time. I just knew the abilities it gave me, which was, if I'm listening, if I say a couple of things, if I understand how they see things and I can feed it back to them, then I'm going to gain traction with them very quickly in a way that they are not prepared for. So they're prepared for arguments. They were never prepared for empathy, ever. Bad guys who rehearse in advance what to expect. Hezbollah in the 80s, when they were kidnapping Westerns all over the place, they were told what the kidnapped victims were going to say. You know, the jailers had bosses, and the jailers would say, you know, they're going to say they're innocent. Here's the predictable dialogue. And so it would wall the jailers off that were holding the hostages. So but then nobody ever prepared for empathy. Al-Qaeda didn't prepare for empathy. ISIS didn't prepare for empathy. It catches them off guard. And I'm delighted that I know it's going to catch you off guard. So as soon as I understood how influential that was, and in very short order, what would catch them off guard, I'm 15, 20 years ago, I'm being brought in to train the hostage negotiation team nationally for the United Arab Emirates. Sheikh that's in charge of counterterrorism at the time. I'm walked in, and they say, look, understand ahead of time, if anybody takes hostages here, Sheikh wants to kill him. You know, if you take hostages on Emirati soil, he doesn't care who you are. You have violated our sovereignty, and we are going to deal with you accordingly. And so don't pitch the Sheikh that you're going to save lives across the board. He wants to know how you're going to make his people more operationally effective. His SWAT teams, how are we going to end this as soon as possible? We don't want any Emiratis to get killed, but we're in here to save bad guys. So I sit down with this guy, fascinating dude, American educated, deeply insightful thinker. And he walks in with no entourage, by himself. So we sit down and he looks at me and he says, what are you going to say? What are you going to teach my guys to say? And I said, here's the opening line I want him to say. What you're doing is a great thing. And his mouth drops open. And he said, now I got you because you can't wait to hear what I'm going to say next. And that's exactly the power I want to give you guys. The bad guy's mouth is going to drop open, and he's going to be sitting there waiting to hear the next word. And that's when they have influence. And he says, you're hired.
I would hire you too. That's wild. How did you know? Did you know you were going to say that before you went in there?
When you start thinking about the dynamics and the patterns for the other side, if some terrorist has taken hostages, how do they see it? They're doing a great thing. Yeah. And, you know, with my colleagues, we talked about it. We understand empathy. How does the other side see it? How do I get into your head? I have to say something that's really close to what the voice in your head is saying at the moment, because otherwise the voice in your head is going to distract you. So as soon as I start lining up with the voice in your head, you don't listen to that, you start listening to me. Now I've got influence.
That's so true. Even in fights, like I can think of that same thing in, like, you know, interpersonal relationships. It's like when somebody's telling me something that is not aligned with the voice in my head, I'm ignoring it. I'm not listening to you. That makes all the sense in the world. And so if you start from that standpoint, the most important part of this conversation is really probably your research and preparation on who the human is. Are you doing a lot of preparation ahead of time? Or do these come back to the big five?
Yeah, well, you know, in point of fact, it comes back to the big five. In point of fact, we were taught initially what we called emotion labeling. Just label the emotion you hear. Now, that emotion was always going to be negative. And so then we made the presumption, well, yeah, of course, it's a bad history, bad situation, so you're going to hear negative emotions. And I didn't really realize at the time, the big five, 4 out of 5 are negative. So I've just started to increase my percentage chances because they're human, not because they're bad guys in a bad situation, but because they're human. And then the brain science, what little there is, the neuroscience that backs it up, none of it contradicts it. There just hasn't been that much to support it. It has shown consistently that calling out negatives, not denying them, calling them out, diffuses them. So that's why one of our, I'm teaching the Black Swan method. I sit down in an opening meeting with you in a business setting. I'm probably going to say, right off the bat, at some point in time, you're probably going to wonder why you're here. At some point in time, you're going to ask yourself, is this worth my time? At some point in time, you're probably going to say to yourself, this guy's just greedy. He's only looking out for himself. I'm deactivating your negatives and inoculating from them, too. That's the other thing. Most people don't realize you inoculate. A lot of people fear, speak the devil into existence. Their experience has been from denying negatives. And the thing that nobody ever notices, instead of saying, I don't want you to think I'm being grabbing with both hands here, that's a denial. But if I were to say instead, it's probably going to feel like I'm grabbing with both hands, your reaction is going to be like, well, you got to look out for yourself.
Yeah, that is. Why do I want to say that? Like, why do we want to say that back to you? Because that's my gut reaction.
Yeah. I think there is a fundamental human instinct for fairness, which the exploiters use against us on a regular basis. Like we call fair the F word. And so why is it so powerful on a regular basis when somebody says to you, like, I just want what's fair? The manipulative negotiators learn that using that phrase will probably cause you to compromise your position, because inside you'd be like, I don't want to be unfair. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be unfair. So I think when we call it out in the other way, then you say, yeah, I got to look out for my side, but you have to look out for yourself too. I know that that's the trigger. Now, why that's the trigger, my hypothesis is that, we are in fact wired for fairness.
Yeah, otherwise we wouldn't exist as a society, right? I mean,
Right.
if we were all Machiavellian to our roots, dark triad, sociopaths that went after our own interests, we wouldn't be able to have a cooperative society.
Right.
We wouldn't be able to innovate to the level that we have. So at some degree, in order for humanity to continue, we had to err more on the side of, peace, sex, continuation of species, as opposed to violence and destruction. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be here. I mean, New York, how many people are in the city? Tens of millions. And if we were all destructive and self-interested at all times, I don't think the city would work.
It'd be Mad Max, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. What about, when I've heard you say before that you don't really lie. Is that true? Has there ever been an investigation or a negotiation where it was life or death, so you had to lie, or you think you should have to lie?
No, I don't think it's ever necessary. I'm very much against it. First of all, liars are really good at spotting lies. And so we'll often invite you to lie to test you. Number one. So it's number two, even if you're great at lying, it's exhaustive. And if I talk to you long enough, you're going to say something contradictory. Right. And I'm going to figure it out. So even if I'm good at it, you're going to catch me, ultimately. And then the relationship is destroyed. So it's often a test. And we know of instance after instance where being determined to tell the truth was what made the difference. And everybody appreciates, it's just don't lie. Just it's really hard. Business these days, deception by omission tends to be accepted. And it's because out of defensiveness. People don't know how to tell the truth. And you get really caught up in short term. And this is another reason why, an example, Egyptian business deal. And I'm picking it out because it's in the Arab world, But they're people. So an Egyptian businessman has got a contract with the Egyptian government for a $4 million contract. It's whatever his company's selling him, and $4 million. And, he's going to get big commission. Company's going to make a lot of money. But he knows it's not going to work. And finally, he can't take it anymore, and he reaches out to his government contact and says, look, this thing you guys are buying from us, it's going to fail you. They cancel a contract on the spot. Now, because he was such a successful salesman, he doesn't get fired. I'm sure he was worried about losing his job, but he just couldn't compromise his integrity, couldn't live with himself. And his boss, since he was a performer, was kind of like, all right, we're going to live with this. 3 months later, same government point of contact comes back to him, awards him a $12 million no-bid contract. So long-term, it's going to work out for you. And even as I'm riffing on this now, listening to an interview by Jordan Peterson the other day, and he says the truth is the best long-term strategy. So, but we get caught up between short-term success and short-term fears versus long-term. I'm long-term. And when you start looking around for it, the truth is the best long-term strategy. But it feels like it's going to cost you now, and it scares the heck out of you, which is why often people defer to deception by omission, and so many people are kind of forgiving of it. But when I find out that you deceived me by omission, I'm probably not going to be angry with you, but I'll never trust you again.
Yeah, you have it just like in the back of your head a little bit. Yeah, were you always like that? Like, were you like that as a kid, or is that something that you became after being in the bureau?
No, and my father was very high integrity, a hardworking, high integrity, I'm proud to say, a very blue collar guy.
Yeah, so he kind of instilled that in you.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because it definitely, even if you look at a lot of our politicians today on whichever side, it's almost like, I kind of laugh watching the debate because you're like, well, who lied more, But it's not like who didn't lie.
Right,
it's like,
exactly.
who lied more? So we have this natural proclivity, I think, in society to say it's cool. Like, we know they lied, but like not that much.
Right.
And I do think that negates our institutions by and large.
Yeah. Well, we start with what's a white lie, and then how big does that latitude get, and then for what purpose?
Yeah. What are some of the tells about somebody lying to you or not? How can you tell if somebody's lying to you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I don't believe in tells per se. I believe much more in the way a polygraph works. Polygraph tries to figure out what you look like when you're telling the truth. So then when you come out of that profile, then you're lying or you're deceiving. Prosecutor, Southern District of New York, Pat Fitzgerald, brilliant dude, used to always say the truth comes out the same way every time. So I will talk to you not looking for tells, but I'm going to try to draw a bead on what you look like when you're telling the truth. Every now and then somebody wants to play, they interview me, they want to play this 2 truths and a lie game. And so what I do typically is I just start firing questions at you, and then we go through any one of your stories, and then the minute you're out of sync, I'm like, all right, so 2 truths and a lie, which 2 stories came out the same way, which story came out differently, what did you do differently? All I know is it's different. So what does that mean? That means tells are situational to the person. In very broad terms, you can kind of guess. But another interview that I'm hearing recently, the person who's kind of this body language expert says, all right, so if you got a frown on your face, if you look angry, you could be angry. You could have gas.
True.
If I go, oh, they're angry, and they're not, then you've blown it. Mm-hmm. You went down the wrong rabbit hole. So tells per se are strictly within context to the person, and I will talk to you long enough until I get an idea what you look like when you're telling the truth. That's what I'm looking for.
Interesting. And so how do you do you think you can beat a polygraph test?
You can't beat a good polygrapher. And it's whether or not the polygrapher is any good. And a really good polygrapher will tell you before they put you on the box whether or not you're lying. And a good polygrapher, either if you tell the truth one way. Maybe you never tell the truth. And a polygraph will pick that up. And so that's why a good polygrapher will say, we detect deception across the board. So we don't know what they're lying about. We don't know what they're telling the truth about. All we know is they're not into telling the truth. And so you don't beat the polygraph per se. Nobody ever, if it comes back inconclusive, which was the good polygraphers in the bureau, say it's inconclusive. They're like, okay, good. The guy's hiding something. We just don't know where it is or what it is. And so every now and then somebody will take a polygraph. We asked him 5 questions and he passed the polygraph. No, you got to ask about 30 questions. So I know if they asked 5 questions, then it was a lousy operator, not the machine. And so the operators vary so wildly. That's why it's generally not admissible in court.
That makes all the sense in the world. So it's really expertise as opposed to equipment.
Yeah.
Ah, I didn't know that.
I heard about I never met him, but I heard about a guy in a bureau. He'd ask you a question and write down every body movement that you made after he asked a question. Very patient dude. Here's a question: what'd you have for breakfast? What day is it? What city you in? Baseline questions. If you tell the truth, you're going to answer each one of those questions exactly the same way. He's going to get a complete beat on that. Now, where were you last Thursday? For the first time, you held your breath for just a moment. He's going to see that. And so he was really good. He'd put him on the box afterwards, but he'd tell you what was going to happen because he was so observant of everything.
Yeah. You said in the beginning something crazy, which is it makes
I hope so.
some good stuff. You said that obviously the bureau is trying to figure out what makes psychopaths, what makes serial killers, and you mentioned that it could be what happened to them with kids with inconsistent, really bad parenting, basically.
Yeah.
Like, go deeper there. Like if I have a kid and he hurts his sister, and the first time I spank him. And the second time I don't, does that create psychopaths? Like, what's the level of the game here as far as you guys found it?
There are a variety of ways it could happen. One of them is, first of all, if there are no rules, if there really are no rules, if there's no right and wrong, then you can act on impulse, because what do you have to feel guilty about? You feel guilty because you did something wrong. What if there is no wrong? What if it's all in your head? So how do you learn right and wrong? From your parents, from your religion, from your government. That's how you learn right and wrong. So the profilers, they start looking first at what happened. Did the parents teach them there were no rules? And then subsequently, what did the parents believe in? Because your parents could teach you there are no rules, but if you believe in religion, every religion's got a set of rules. Or what if you're in the Soviet Union, or you're in a country that doesn't believe in religion or actively discourages religion as a set of rules to govern behavior? We start finding out, we collective hostage negotiators globally, every now and then we'd get somebody from another country that would take hostages and they would kill indiscriminately. And we couldn't understand why. They were from countries where the governments fell. So if you're from a country where you got your rules from the government and the government fell, what did you learn? There are no rules. So where do you get your rules? And at some point in time, did something happen that caused you to believe that it was all made up and there was no right and wrong? And then there's some other behaviors that might interact to lean you in one direction or another.
So do you think that like today in society, we know that religion is declining, like organized religion uptick. Maybe not over the last 2 years. It seems like there's some trend reversal, but I haven't seen the data. But we have seen, let's call it over the last 100 years, real decline in organized religion uptick in America.
Right.
Also, we've seen, I mean, we're in New York. It appears to me that we have a little bit of we've got a disagreement with rules here, depending on who you are. You know, it's like, is it lawful? Is it not?
Right.
Kind of depends.
Right.
So do you think that means that we're creating more psychopaths today?
Yeah, I don't think so. Although the number has fluctuated. Like when I first started looking at the number, you know, they used to say like 1 in every 112, 116. And now they're saying roughly 1 in 35. Which then I really enjoyed talking to groups of more than 35.
That's horrifying. Is
Because
that
then I'll say, look around the room. Look around the room, see if you can spot psychopaths, because there's more than 35 of us here. That means there's at least one.
Whoa.
So are we creating more, or are we just increasing our ability to detect them? So while there may be a decline in organized religion, I'm not sure that correlates with a decline in spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that makes it a different question. And organized religion, bureaucracy-based, then it always gets watered down. You know, I think Bono said something to the effect of Christianity today is what you have when Jesus has left the room. You know, he's very much a believer in Jesus.
Yeah.
He wouldn't describe himself as a Christian. Or, again, Jordan Peterson talking about I think he said his favorite writer or his favorite thinker is Nietzsche, who famously said, God is dead.
Yeah.
And my paraphrase of Jordan's description of that, well, that was just copy. It was good copy to get attention. And then he pointed out that in all of Nietzsche's criticism, he criticized organized religion, but he didn't criticize the Gospels. So then, all right, so now we got a departure. What's spirituality versus organized religion?
Interesting. You know what's kind of fascinating? I know that a lot of people today think that it's weird to talk with somebody that you don't agree with. But
right. Supposed to throw a rock at him, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, beat him to a pulp. But do you think it makes us weird that both you and I, like, really, like, when I was talking to those cartel members, or when I'm talking to somebody that I think is totally out of the loony bin, I'm like so intrigued.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything more fascinating than getting to sit down with somebody that, like, it's almost hard to understand their worldview. And like, does that mean that we're actually less empathetic in a way, or less emotional in a way?
Well, I would, according to my definition of empathy, we're more empathetic.
Yeah. So more empathetic.
And then, this is going to sound very self-serving. I think there's a deeper love for humanity to want to understand every human. Like this, do I love humanity? Some people say, I love people, but I don't like individuals. I don't know where all these lines are. Or I love learning systems and origins, which is anthropology. Like, I'm fascinated. How did you get to be how you are? So I think there's a deep appreciation and a deep optimism there, too. I think there's a very deep optimism behind that, which I think everybody has, but we haven't had it covered up as much. Again, Jordan Peterson's contention in an interview recently was that people obey the law mostly out of cowardice. They're afraid of what's going to happen to them if they break the law, which is a harsh way of describing fear. Just because you're fearful, does that necessarily make you a coward? That depends upon your definition of what being a coward is. But so I think that we've had it less buried in us. Because if we start with the 5 original equipment, and then as we've interacted through life, somebody said something to us. Either mom or dad, probably mom, because we were around mom more, that somewhere deep inside us put an optimistic thing in our brain. After we were born, somewhere in the first 5 years of our life. And I think that has stuck. And we've been lucky enough at those 2 lines of code that somebody embedded in us early on was optimistic.
Yeah, fascinating. What about, you know, so you don't think, so psychopaths aren't born, they're created? Is that what you think? Like, are people born with a psychopathic gene?
I would agree.
Yeah.
I'm there I'm on that hypothesis, yeah.
That's why. So if you have a kid that becomes a psychopath, is it largely your fault as a parent?
Fault versus accountability.
What's the difference?
Yeah, you're going to have to live with it. Yeah, maybe it's a politician's answer. I once heard Chris Christie say, it wasn't my fault that it happened, but I am accountable for the results, which was an interesting distinction. So maybe somebody else did it. And I think that's what some parents really struggle with. Somebody else damaged their kid under their nose, and they didn't see it. And then by the time it manifested itself, it was extremely difficult to reverse, if irreversible at all. So, you know, that's a hard thing. Your kid's going to go out in the world. There are going to be people around you that you should trust that betrayed you. Like, it's a tough thing to lay it all on the parents. It's a tough thing.
Yeah. Do you think that, do you think you can reverse psychopathy? Is that the right way to say it? Can you reverse
I think
psychopathy?
there's some forms of damage that can be reversed, possibly. You know, we're getting into new areas all the time with neuroscience, chemical journeys that previously had been completely illegal and are starting to become experimental in the United States.
Meaning like psychedelics?
Yeah. There are probably certain things that can never be reversed. We are never going to get away from the reality that there are going to be some people that we're going to need to lock up and never let out. Now, how many of them are like that? That's a tough one. You know, what's going to happen to them? Andre Norman, friend of mine, doing serious jail time, convicted for attempted homicide 8 times. Has a moment when effectively God comes to him in a jail cell and says enough. Maybe before that, you'd have been convinced that you'd never get Andre out of what he was. 3rd-ranking prison gang leader in the state he was in. Very, very, very dangerous, very bad guy. Everybody's scared of him for good reason. Now making the world a better place. Before that moment, you'd have said you probably would have said you can never let this dude out. Now he's making a great contribution to planet Earth, so it's a little bit hard to say what's irreversible.
How do you know he's not lying?
My gut. And his actions since, you know, we crossed paths early on, introduced by a very good friend, Joe Polish. And Andre's just doing too much good in the world and just too straightforward. Like, you got a kid who's on drugs, Andre will find him, bring him out.
And he said, what did he say happened?
He was, 2 epiphanies hit him at the same time. And he was, in his description, in his jail cell, plotting 2 murders so that he could rise to number 1. And 2 simultaneously things hit him. He was going to become the king of nowhere. I'm going to be king. And then, what am I the king of? I'm the king of nowhere. And then I've also heard him say that God just said that's enough.
Fascinating. So the only answer is it's not like here's steps 1 through 7 to stop becoming a psychopath. There's no 4-hour work week to psychopath's behavior changing.
Yeah. How do you solve the riddle? I don't know. Keep trying. Don't give up.
I've heard you also say that a lot about tone with your voice, which every time we talk, I always notice with you. You have like really good intonation. And I was reading a study that I thought was fascinating that shows that 38% of communication after studying hundreds of people in the workplace came through tone not even the words that we said, but the way that we said them,
Right.
determined our outcome. So if somebody got what they wanted or somebody didn't get what they want, it was often the way they said it, not the thing that they said.
Right, right. What was the percentage again?
38%.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Oh,
Does
yeah.
that seem right?
Yeah. Yep. I've seen a 38% number crop up a lot. Yeah.
Okay. And do you think that that's true? And what do you know about tone and how to use it in conversations?
Tone is like the spin on a football or a baseball. Like a baseball player wants to throw a strike. For the ball to hit its target, it has to have spin. And so they throw a knuckleball. A baseball player pitches a ball that has no spin. The thing flies all over the place. Nobody knows where the hell it's going. The catcher doesn't know where it's going. And nobody knows. It's going to miss the mark. So tone is very much like putting spin on a ball. It's essential for it to hit its target. And so then when you begin to experiment with it and are fascinated by it, curious about it, and you start picking it up different ways. The great comedians. Chris Rock delivers his monologue in a monotone. Nobody's going to laugh. But he starts adding his tone of voice. And then everything hits the mark. So if you're interested in communicating verbally, you start studying tone. You notice tone. And then if you want your words to be effective, and I start realizing a certain tone, it doesn't matter how nice I said what I said or how nice the words were. If my tone was off, it ain't going to land. And so I want to be effective. And so I start to pay attention. And then hostage negotiations and the suicide hotline, they taught us, the downward inflecting, calming tone, the late night FM DJ voice. And then I'm doing a training after I understood how powerful that was. Psychologist in a room, hypnotherapist comes up to me afterwards. He says, that's exactly the same tone of voice hypnotherapists are taught. So I'm like, ooh, there's more to this than meets the eye. And then the neuroscience starts to kick in, and your response to my tone of voice is a neurochemical response, which means it's not a choice. And if I can trigger neurochemicals in your brain, then you can't stop me from triggering them. Now, you can fight them, but I can initiate the process, which then is why curiosity is impossible to resist, because my curious tone is going to dissolve your barriers. And whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Do I get to tell my husband now next time we fight if I don't like his tone that it's not going to land at all? Do you ever say that to Wendy? She's like, "Listen, your tone, buddy, ma'am."
Oh, I hear about my tone from Wendy every now and then. Wendy occasionally gets the real me. We joke around. We refer occasionally to me as her emotional support porcupine.
Actually, that's my Chris too. Maybe it's a Chris thing. It's a Chris thing. He is literally the best emotional support animal, but he is a porcupine.
Every now and then.
Oh my God, he's going to hate this, but that's true. Okay, so apologies to Wendy, but let's imagine that you're not with your beautiful...
By the way, she told me, she wanted me to tell you, and I tried to get the specifics out of her. You've got some place where you encourage people that are struggling with their businesses to get help and sell off assets or right themselves. And she had a cosmetic perfume endeavor with a celebrity social media influencer that didn't do the work.
Whoa.
Let him down in a big way. And she saw what you had, and she took the issue to some advisors, and now not only are they not going to lose money, but she's going to end up putting her investors in the black. So she wanted to thank you for that.
Yes, I love hearing that. That's so cool. I gotta ping her on that. What's interesting is I found, and I would be curious your take. One, we didn't learn this stuff. We didn't learn negotiation, which is why your book was so important. Then we really didn't learn deal structuring and deal making, which is like taking your negotiation tactics and applying the language that is money or finance,
Yes.
aka deal-making
Yeah,
terms.
two separate skills.
Right, putting them together.
Yeah.
And especially for women, we really don't negotiate deals typically as often as our male counterparts.
Right.
Like I've found by and large, women will be the ones that let the business go down or like, don't want to engage in the really tough conversation that's
Right.
you fucked this up. You didn't do what you said you were going to do. This partnership is not going to work. And obviously it would be better packaged than that.
Yes.
But instead of doing that, we just kind of let it slide. And I see it because we have like 3,000 members in our group, and I watch the difference between men and women, and it's a weird female phenomenon that I've seen. So I'm really excited that she did that. She seems like a badass overall, but a lot of women don't do that. Have you found there's big differences between the way women and men negotiate? Is my little qualitative study at all real in the world?
It's real. It's in my view, it's due more to nurture than nature. So, little boys, you're getting a dust up when you're a kid. You go home, dad tells you, shake it off, walk it off, go back and kick his ass. Yeah. Stand up for yourself, fight. Women are generally nurtured by older women to work on the soft skills. Yeah. Think about long-term, think of the relationship. So I think the nurturing for women there is to be more hopeful, to be more soft-skilled, more long-term relationship-oriented. So then getting into a world that appears to be combative, and women as generally to be nurtured not to be combative, they have been nurtured into assertion. Mm-hmm. But if they can blend assertion with the soft skills, then suddenly they're superstars. Yeah. And so then how does it get blended? Mm-hmm. The blending has been picked up most recently in the last decade or two, which I'm delighted to see, because I'm a last century guy. Last century, women were told to be one of the guys, which would extinguish their femininity. And in today's world, women are encouraged to retain their femininity in the business world. And it's starting to take hold, where they can be very feminine at work. They can be a Lori Grenier, very feminine. And Lori Grenier is still going to kick your ass. I love it on Shark Tank when in a super sweet way, she tells Mr. Wonderful to shut up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you like her while she's doing it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of nice.
Yeah, so it's becoming more acceptable to become a badass. Somebody like you has the opportunity, hasn't sacrificed a bit of your femininity and being a badass. On the Fireside app, the Fireside show that I have, Fallon Macbeth, Fallon Fatamy, younger badass female, very, very feminine. So it's becoming openly encouraged instead of openly discouraged. And so women are still catching up. There aren't as many role models, but the role models are starting to emerge. And like when Riyadh, supposedly the Islamic Sharia police and a male-dominated culture, which was them 15 years ago, which, the current leader, MBS, says that ain't taking us into the future. So at this conference, if I'm surrounded out in the hall by women of all ethnicities, because they can't get enough of this. And they're being asked in Riyadh to be in implementation, influence, get it done, lead positions. And so they're looking to get into it, and they're looking to get it done. They don't want to be jerks. They don't want to be kicking chairs across the table as a default mechanism. Now, every now and then you got to kick a chair across the room, but not as your first move.
Have you ever actually kicked a chair across the room?
No.
Thrown one?
Not yet. I'm sure people that work for me have said that it felt like it.
Yeah, I remember when I was younger, you're right. I remember the generation of women right before me that were tough. Like, and in a lot of ways, I think they had to be, and so they were more masculine, more like the other men.
Right.
And I thought I had to be like that too. I don't know if Wendy ever went through that, but I like cut my hair real short and didn't wear makeup and wore the suit and all the things. And it was kind of ridiculous. And it really makes you like less endearing in a way, because you're like, yeah, bro, what's up? And you're like, don't call me bro. Right. And so it doesn't feel very real. It's almost like you're lying, but not on purpose.
I think so. I think if you're extinguishing part of you to try to fit in, it's a bad idea. And for women, that is called for less now. There are, you got a large audience, and they're not being ridiculed over it. They're not being told to be. If somebody tells them to be one of the guys, they were like, yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly. No, they won't. The other thing that I thought was interesting was I read this other statistic that said that there was a study done on a couple big corporations, but across thousands of individuals, that showed that it isn't intelligence as measured by IQ that increases earnings. It's instead that those with higher ranking emotional intelligence earn on average $29,000 more than those with lower emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I'll buy that.
That's annually. You think it's true?
1,000%.
Interesting. So if you have higher emotional intelligence, you could make more money.
Yes, and you can cultivate it, and you can learn it, and there's no limit to it. And it's perishable, which means if you don't pay attention to it, it'll go away. But you can rekindle it by paying attention to it.
And by paying attention to it, that just means like asking more questions and really wanting to know the answer?
Well, being more curious, and then also, we call it a cold read. Like, I walk into an airport, and I'm getting ready to check in at the counter, and the woman behind the counter is not meeting my eyes. And I'm next in line. And she's not looking up. Finally, she kind of, okay, looks at me. So a very well-intentioned but really wrong approach would be, how are you today? Well, I've seen that she's not good. And if I go, how are you today? I'm telling her that I'm not, I have my own agenda, and I'm not paying attention to her. I walk up instead, and I go, tough day? And she'll go, and this has happened. She'll go, no, and smile. To me, that's just practice. Get out of how are you today, and a little bit more into, looks like it's a tough day. Because you're not going to plan it. Looks like you're having a good day. You look distracted. You look like something's on your mind. That's practice on your emotional intelligence. And I do it on a regular basis because I know it's perishable. Also, I'm very intentioned about my important phone calls. I don't take a call while I'm driving, while I'm walking. I'm sitting and listening. But I might get a call that I got to take in the airport. So I'm going to do some cold reads, emotional intelligence, at the TSA guys, at somebody else in line. Because the phone might ring, and it might be somebody that I've been trying to get on the phone for weeks, and I got to take the call. So you can work on your emotional intelligence in little ways. You can work on it with your spouse, your significant other, and say, look, I'm trying to be more attentive. So there's all these opportunities to stay sharp.
And so simple. That doesn't really take much time.
Simple stuff.
Yeah, it seems like most things in life that have outsized return are not that complex, which doesn't mean they're not easy, but they're pretty simple.
Very good point. And simple is often, if it takes you out of your comfort zone, most people over the age of 25 don't want to get out of the comfort zone. But after 25, if you find that you like it, then, out of your comfort zone is where accelerated learning takes place. And if you then understand that, they're like, oh, wow, I can get better faster? I'm in.
Yeah. I want to ask you one more question to close out, but I wanted to tell you, too, I meant to tell you last time, that I had a bunch of our employees take the quiz at Black Swan.
Yeah.
which I thought was so useful for us and for them.
Yeah.
And so we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, the types.
Yeah, exactly.
okay.
And so what is the name of the quiz again?
It's the 3 types, 3 negotiator types.
Yeah. And so this really helped me because we hired 2 new executives that were materially different.
Wow. Okay.
And I am not always the best with I kind of can get in my lane where I go, I'm doing this, I'm going, and I could not pay attention to cues. And that really helped me actually to think
wow.
about,
Awesome.
here's how they not only negotiate, but just like communicate through life.
Yes.
So if anybody at all is wondering how to get a team to work better, how to understand your partner, I think that quiz is super, super helpful. So that's just at blackswan.com.
Yeah, blackswanltd.com.
blackswanltd.com. Obviously, Chris Voss on all the socials. I really like the Instagrams that you're doing lately.
Thank you, yeah.
They're my little also reminder of the cues and the things I can do daily to get better at negotiation. Like Chris had a big negotiation yesterday, and I saw him. He took a big breath beforehand.
Very good, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like reset his adrenal state, and then
Yep.
jumped in.
Yep.
So I know that's from you. But the last question I wanted to ask you is, do you think that you can be interested in anyone? Like, is there a way to have any human be an interesting conversation and to never be bored when talking to somebody?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, that's the way I delightfully sort of try to go through my life. Yeah, you can. If you're interested in where people come from, like I may not like you, but I want to know how you got to how you are. Or I also know if I'm deeply curious in you, there's a really good chance I'm going to be able to gain some influence in you. So to me, it's a combination of being both a missionary and a mercenary.
So do you ever have a moment where you're meeting with someone and you're like, God, I'm so bored right now in this conversation? And how do you get out of that?
Bored. If I find somebody whose core values are vastly different than mine, like if they're way into manipulation, or
What if they just yammer about a bunch of stuff that you don't care about? Like, what if it's like PTA meetings and their dogs and something else that is unimportant to you in this situation? How do you flip your script on that?
Well, for me, if my energy level is there to intervene, like if I'm tired and I'm burned out, I don't know if I'm an omnivore or an outgoing introvert, I don't know what it is. So if they're yammering on away and I just don't have the gas in the tank, I'm not going to fall asleep in front of them, but I'm not going to engage. But if I can rally the energy, then I'm going to be able to get them out of it. I'm going to, whatever they're yammering on about, there's an interest in there that's probably fascinating. So I'm gonna trigger into it, and then also my favorite question these days. Let's say they're yammering on about the PTA. I'll probably say, "What do you love about the PTA?" Now that's probably going to trigger an instantaneous state change in them, and change the conversation. And then I can dig into it deeply, and pretty soon I'm going to find out fascinating stuff about them.
Then it's like straight to daddy issues, deep talk.
Yeah, whatever it might be,
Interesting.
ethnic issues, their perception of the world, how the world kicked their ass unfairly. But it's going to change from a boring conversation to an interesting one if I can rally the energy to do it.
I love that. I think that's kind of nice because there's no excuse then to not have a conversation to go to deeper level with a human. And sometimes I make too many jokes about like, I'm so over small talk. That's pretty lazy on my part. And if I'm skilled enough, I should be able to go deeper than the small talk.
Yeah, well, exactly. You can. Small talk doesn't do anybody any good, but what's driving a small talk and it's probably fascinating.
Yeah.
And so let's make the change.
Love that. Chris Voss, you're the man.
Thank you very much. I would like to add in a shameless commercial.
Yes, let's do it.
All right, so March 17th and 18th, 2025, we're doing a negotiation mastery summit in Louisville.
Ooh.
Now, we ended up in Louisville because actually my company's going to put out a bourbon next year.
Get out. I also love Louisville. It is a cool city.
And we found ourselves tasting bourbon in Louisville, and we thought, this has got to be a great place to have a conference.
Love this.
So the purpose, why should anybody go to a 2-day conference? because you make a quantum leap forward when you immerse yourself. Now, your husband or anybody else that's reading our stuff, I'm going to want you to get better incrementally. I'm going to want you to know before negotiation, take a deep breath. You should be constantly working on getting a little bit better each day.
Yep.
But if you're working the skills and you want to, then in 2 days, you want to make 6 months of progress.
Totally.
Then you go to a 2-day immersion. And we're gonna have some cool stuff there.
I'm coming.
It's gonna be enjoyable.
I'm going to send
and
some of our team too. Can
gonna-
anybody come?
Absolutely.
Okay. I like it.
We'll be in Louisville.
Yep.
There may be some occasional sampling of bourbon involved.
I'm into that too. We got to lessen everybody's guards. Where do they go to learn more about it?
BlackSwanLTD.com.
And it's going to be, it's a pop up there or something.
Yeah.
They'll see it right away.
Live in-person event, Louisville.
Amazing. I love that idea. We're going to be there. You're the man. Chris Voss, thank you so much.
Thank you.